Hey, Jill.
Resident Evil Revelations 1 and 2 both arrived on modern-day platforms in late 2017 to the rejoice of many. In particular, the Nintendo Switch received a very interesting collection of the two games. Now, instead of looking at the collection itself, I'm going to review both titles separately, as for all the other systems and even other regions, the games were released individually. On the Switch, only the first part is included on the game card, whereas the sequel requires a whopping 26GB download. Be warned, Switch players, you're going to need an SD card if you want to play Revelations 2. Now, on with the review. Way back in February 2012, Capcom released Resident Evil Revelations on the Nintendo 3DS, and it was a true return to form for the series. It combined the more action-focused elements from Resident Evil 4 and 5 with the creepiness from the original trilogy. You played as Jill Valentine as she made her way through the derelict ship Queen Zenobia. It was one of the very best third-party exclusives for the portable, and I had an absolute blast with it. Steven and I even put in quite a few hours into the raid mode. Now, unbeknownst to us, Capcom would eventually bring the game to virtually every platform under the sun, including the Wii U. Fast forward 5 years and the game returns to Nintendo hardware, this time the highly successful Switch, although it has also made its jump to the PC, PlayStation 4, and Xbox One as well. So what made Resident Evil Revelations so interesting? For one thing, like I said, it was a return to form. Before this game, the series had really started to move further and further away from survival horror and more towards pure action. This one was something of a hybrid. The bulk of the game takes place on the Queen Zenobia, which is a cruise liner that's gone adrift on the ocean, and just so happens to be crawling with undead biomutants. These segments, in which Jill is mostly partnered up with a non-playable buddy character named Parker, are the absolute best parts of the game. There are other gameplay sections that don't quite fare as well. Chris Redfield returns, and his sections mostly play sort of like Resident Evil 5, where it's really heavy into the action. The same is true for the third set of characters that you play as. Thankfully, these sections are rather short and don't bring down the experience. You'll be back to the creep fest before you know it. The episodic nature of the story feels like it was pulled right out of Alan Wake. This is a very interesting way of making the player feel as though they're part of almost like a video series. Each segment ends with a "next time on Resident Evil Revelations," and the next segment begins with a "previously on Resident Evil Revelations." And it can be a little bit jarring when you're playing the game straight to have to sit through both of these quick little cinematics, but overall, it's a fun and creative way to tell the story. The gameplay is mostly what fans will be rather used to. The action portions are quick and adrenaline-inducing, whereas the slower-paced sections with Jill are much more puzzle-based in the sense of you having to locate specific keys to progress. To help you in your journey, there's a new device called the Genesis, which allows you to scan the environments in order to locate hidden objects such as ammunition. But it goes one step further in so much that you can scan enemies, which will eventually give you an additional healing item. Now, depending on the difficulty that you're playing, this can be very useful. The audio-visual presentation looks absolutely fantastic while playing in portable mode on the Switch, as the simpler geometry isn't quite as noticeable and textures look a lot sharper. That's not to say it looks bad while playing in TV mode or being played via the PlayStation 4 on PC or the Xbox One. It's just that the game was designed from the ground up for a portable device, and you can clearly see that while playing on the big screen. The music and ambient noises sound great, and overall, this really feels like a legacy Resident Evil, but with a modern coat of paint. I should also mention that the Switch version does allow the use of motion controls if you so desire, although I've personally never been a fan. Outside the core campaign, there's also a fully fleshed out raid mode which allows you to play through custom levels of the game with a buddy online. This is where Steven and I spent hours upon hours with the 3DS version of the game, and I could easily see us doing the same thing here. The Switch version also has amiibo support, which basically unlocks BP for use in raid mode to purchase new weapons and upgrades, so it's rather useful to use the amiibo when you can. There's a 24-hour lock on amiibo you use, so in other words you can't overuse them, unless of course you happen to have hundreds of these things sitting around. Resident Evil Revelations is a brilliant game and it ports perfectly to the Switch. Yes, it may be a somewhat lazy port in that you're not really getting that much new, but it's well worth revisiting if you haven't played it in ages or if this is the first time you're playing it. While I've played some of the PlayStation 4 version and it's certainly nice, I would strongly recommend the Switch version solely for the fact that you can play this on the go and that you can get the big screen version as well. Since the game was created for gaming on the go, it's absolutely a perfect fit for the Switch.
It's time you learned the truth, Miss Valentine.